All right, so let's talk about the Punisher 2004, right? So this is apparently the best Punisher film, or if you want to just call it just in general, this is definitely the best film of the three Punisher interpretations, right? As a Punisher movie, that's debatable, I guess. You know, some people say it's Warzone, but as a film, this is definitely the best from acting to, you know, direction. I think it's just all around just a lot more better than the other two. Now, for me personally, I think the biggest problem this movie kind of had was that it was a little bit ahead of its time, right? This came out in 2004. You had Daredevil, X-Men, you know, even Hulk or whatever. You know, and all those kind of like movies, they kind of had that comic booky vibe, you know, a little bit of a fantasy element to it. Where this one was so grounded in reality to the point where I think a lot of people wasn't really expecting that, nor did they really want that at the time. Now, this would have came out post '08, where everybody was getting wet for fucking dark and gritty superheroes. I think this movie actually would have succeeded a lot more better, quite frankly. And I think, you know, we probably would have had a sequel by now for Thomas Jane Punisher, and we wouldn't have 2008's Warzone most likely. Now, for me personally, this movie's a little bit of a throwback to like the 70s action films, like Steve McQueen. You see a little bit McQueen and Bullet from the car chase with Harry Heck, even though it's very short. Or you see a little bit of Mad Max, the original Mad Max, like when his family's getting killed. You know, it's essentially a shot for shot, pretty much, of how his family got killed in the original Mad Max. From the shotgun running after to his family pretty much getting run over to kind of getting revenge. You know, copy and paste, really. A little bit of Bronson I see in there. You know, High Plains Drifter, some Western vibes are in there. Like when Castle's in a bank and he sees Halberstein's two guards, right? He pretty much draws, right? And that's pretty much essentially a Western duel. Even the score, which is a fantastic score and has a great soundtrack. If you haven't heard the soundtrack, watch or not watch it, listen to it. It's a fantastic soundtrack, but the score is even better. You know, it does have that like Sergio Leone, you know, Western, you know, vibe score, whatever to it, you know. Now, for me personally, this movie actually is a pretty great film. This movie is more of a character study of Frank Castle just in general. Now, this is essentially one long origin story from point A to point B, very to the end to the credits. And I kind of liked that. You know, some movies for the comic book world, they do kind of just do the origin story in like, 10, 20 minutes or whatever. But this is essentially him just building up to be the Punisher up until the very end. So I did kind of like that. But that's kind of where the problem kind of lies, is that this movie does have pacing issues, right? And that's one of the biggest problems of this movie, is that it does have pacing issues to the point where there's a lot of shit in here that really is just like bleh, to the point where it's just like, I don't care about Howard, you know, Saints and his, you know, wife's problems or Quentin being gay. I don't really care for that shit. Now, granted, I care about his wife. His wife is, you know, that's a plus right there. But overall, you know, it was okay. The supporting casting here I thought was actually pretty good. You know, Rebecca Romaine, Ben Foster, Fido, whatever you want to call them. I thought they were actually quite good. They had an emotional weight to the film that really isn't really there that much. But I did like them. Now, for Thomas Jane, the star of this movie, he knocks it out of the park. Obviously, everybody talks about this, right? Now, for Thomas Jane, compared to like Dolph Lundgren or even Ray Stevenson, right? He didn't really have brute force to me, right? He's a very small guy for the most part. He's a big guy, but a very small guy compared to the other two. For him, I feel like instead of using guns or violence or whatever, and he does use it, I feel like he was more of a tactician and you know, like an improviser, right? Or somebody that improvises a lot. He's grabbing stuff from the environment. He's using it as a weapon, from the saucepans to, you know, the thing that cut the paper. He uses the environment to his advantage, and I thought that was kind of a cool way to add to the Punisher. And if you ever played the PS2 game of the Punisher, that's pretty much what they eventually will go on to do, pretty much, right? So for this movie, Howard Saint, right? John Travolta. I never really bought John Travolta in this role. I thought Travolta was okay in this. Honestly, quite frankly, I actually was laughing at him towards the end. He seemed like he was kind of, you know, chewing up the scenery a little bit. Now, Will Patton, on the other hand, actually was terrifying, and I actually believed him. Quite frankly, Will Patton is a way better actor than John Travolta, I believe. And not only that, but I actually believed him more as the vicious gangster, personally. Now, for Saint and Castle, their build up their relationship, right? The point where they hate each other. But the funny thing is, they only have one fucking scene in the entire movie, and that's the very end. It's kind of like Heat and for Pacino and De Niro, right? They only have one scene, but it's very effective, and it's very it pretty much sums up the film, and that's kind of what it is. That's a very cool scene towards the end, you know, the Punisher blowing up, even though it's kind of ridiculous. But I thought it was actually a very cool scene that that they only really met once. But they have this big hatred for each other. Some things that really was kind of stupid was that his wife, even though, you know, at the very beginning he's DEA agent, and they do kind of throw hints that he was a soldier, you know, but his wife pretty much says, you know, kill his family, kill his entire family. After he only killed like one of their sons, so she says, all right, now let's kill every one of his 15 fucking family members. That makes complete fucking sense. But no, some other standouts in here is Harry Heck. The restaurant scene I thought was fantastic. That music, the song he played. One, if somebody came to a restaurant and started singing that shit to me, I'd probably run away or just be like, dude, I'm eating my eggs. Leave me alone. But yeah, the car chase was very short, as I mentioned earlier, and it did feel like a bullet. Steve McQueen, as I said. But it just cut very short to the point. It was just like, whatever. Did the budgets come in? The Russian. Everybody loves the Russian. Kevin Nash did a good job. That was a cool fight. Probably one of the standouts of the thing. But overall, yeah, this movie actually was good. It's just that I think it just felt a little bit too bland for people at the time. Overall, this is actually a pretty good Punisher interpretation. Go looking at notes from here. But overall, yeah, it pretty much just it felt very well to the point where it really wasn't much of a problem. From the acting to, as I said, this is pretty much a character study how Castle pretty much works. Some things that really kind of felt a little bit stupid to me was, the son, right? He gives him the shirt, and then he eventually picks up the shirt. Because I was just like, wow, we must be lucky. It must be a big old coincidence that Frank Castle found his son's shirt after the attack. He was like, wow, this is what I'm going to use. Because if he didn't find the shirt, we wouldn't have had a movie apparently. But also, the movie just kind of ends a little bit towards the end. Tom James' monologues are fantastic all throughout. But one thing I did like was that they didn't really make Thomas Jane out to be unstoppable, right? He did take hits. He did have to stitch himself up. But yeah, there's a lot of good lines in here. A pretty solid dialogue. To me personally, Thomas Jane is definitely the best Punisher, but he was not necessarily in the right Punisher film for me personally. For me, what I'm seeing is that if you would have took the writers of this movie, right, and you would have took Thomas Jane, you would have put him in Warzone, I think that would have been the best Punisher interpretation, I think, personally, if you had to just mix the three up. But that was just my thoughts. But overall, this was actually a pretty good movie. It's just that the Howard Saint stuff really wasn't that interesting. John Travolta really wasn't believable to me, personally. And the movie does kind of go off, it just kind of ends, even though with a good monologue, it just kind of ends. But yes, that's my review of The Punisher 2004. A movie a little bit ahead of its time, and once again, to wrap it up and say it should have came out probably post Dark Knight, where people wanted the more dark and gritty superhero movies. But yes, that's my review. Comment, subscribe, and like. I'm Chris Smith, and I'm signing out.